Welcome to Season 3 of the Chai Break Podcast. We're excited to engage in more inspiring conversations around our cross-cultural experiences.
This season, we're diving deep into an often grey area and a taboo in our culture, mental health and well-being. So, join us on our mission to break the barriers and get comfortable in those often uncomfortable spaces. Hello. Welcome to the Chai Break Podcast. So after 2 seasons, 26 episodes, 13 trailblazing South Asian guests, so many aha moments and inspiring stories later, we're excited to kick off a brand new season with all of you. Rema, I think it's been a minute, right? Since you and I actually sat down for like a deep dive conversation.
Oh yeah, so true, Shwetha. Well, it's been a minute. That's funny. Well, there's so much that's happened, right? We've been, at least in my side of things, that I have moved with the family across the country, settled into a new home, got a new job. Because of that, we settled into a new home. And just there's been a lot of moving pieces here. So, but that being said, it's been so long since we've had this conversation. So I'm so excited about our theme for this new season because it's pretty close to our hearts.
Indeed. This one is really close to our heart. First of all, although obvious, right? We've picked mental health and well-being as our theme for season 3. Mm-hmm. And really, like most of the topics we've discussed so far in our 2 seasons, the guests we've interviewed, everything has in some form or shape stemmed from our own personal experiences and women we've whose trajectory, whose journey we've been inspired by.
Right.
And this season actually is no different.
Yeah.
So one of the first things we wanted to address, and I think that's always the elephant in the room when it comes to mental health and well-being, especially in the South Asian space, is normalizing therapy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. And before we actually talk about normalizing therapy, I think it's very important to kind of lay the foundation, lay the base, to kind of give our listeners a glimpse into when, how, and what got us thinking about therapy for ourselves personally and our own journeys.
Yeah, I think therapy has this whole stigma to it, right? I mean, I'm going to seek therapy. Immediately they'd be like, why? What's wrong with you? It's like as if like, why would you do that? Like, you seem so normal, as if like you have to have some abnormal symptoms or signs to really go seeking therapy. I think therapy is, everybody goes through some experience that shaped them in some way or the other. Be it a childhood experience, doesn't have to be a huge traumatic episodes, but just childhood inconveniences or little stresses, and then adulthood inconvenience and stresses. It could be from jobs. It could stem from a very challenging relationship or marriage. It could be from a very, demeaning peers or from a very overbearing boss. It could be from anything. So therapy is just a way of going and understanding and processing our approach to a situation like that based on how we have had or have patterns from our past. Yeah. And I think that is when people start understanding that point of view, I think therapy doesn't become this huge, kind of word that people have to stay away from. Oh, I've never sought therapy. Look at me. I'm so perfect. I don't think that ever exists. And I used to think that way at one time, because again, we're talking about our cross-cultural experiences growing up in India and moving here. And there was always this time when, when somebody sought attention for mental health issues or therapy, and those days they called it psychiatrist, going for psychiatric treatment. One always like, oh my God, what's wrong with them? Something mental.
Mental, yeah. And actually mental was a slang. Like if you think about it, are you mental? Yeah. It kind of means you're crazy. Yeah. You are actually crazy.
Are you mental?
Yeah. Yeah. And, but yeah, I mean, it's almost like therapy should be seen as an outlet.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
A neutral third party outlet, this person who is just listening to you.
Yeah.
You're just pouring your heart out.
Yeah.
And, for a lot of people, even though they haven't, if you think, oh no, I've never actually seek professional therapy or professional help,
yeah,
it just might be that one or two confidants, that best friend, that mentor or someone in your life that you've actually poured your heart out and talked about the way you felt.
Yeah.
Because I feel like even before you and me ever seeked professional help, we both have opened our hearts to each other. I know that I have had a few friends that I've opened my heart to, and which, has given us that temporary solace at least. And, saying that, hey, I see you, I hear you, your experiences are valid. Sometimes that's all you need.
Correct.
You don't even need solutions.
Yeah.
But you just need to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think therapy goes a little step further in that it's not just the listening, but, what happens is when, over time, as you're talking and as you're listening, there are certain questions. A good therapist will always have a few questions trying to probe into, but try to be more curious about certain repeating patterns and bring that to your attention. And then a lot of it is tied, pretty much everything is tied to experiences that we have undergone in life, keeping us repeating the same patterns that happens. And once you're aware of the triggers and the patterns, I think it's, that's when real solutions arise. So you can really be more conscious about the triggers that are always in display. You can be more conscious about the patterns you're repeating. And then you can rewire the brain, rewire the behavior. So it actually produces more of a productive environment and outcome rather than keeping on giving the same issues again and again. Maybe you must have heard many times, oh my God, why do I always choose the same kind of a boss? Why do I always end up with the same kind of a work environment? Yet it only leaves you wondering, maybe it is a pattern you're displaying that just attracts that kind of an environment to you. And the same thing with relationships, right? So many times therapy for me is understanding where and why I draw those experiences, especially the why. And once you really know the why, it helps rewire the situation and kind of, not do the same repeating patterns again.
Yeah. And I think the base of all those repeating patterns, I think step one is to kind of identify and be aware of those patterns. Oh, see, I'm doing that thing again. Like catching yourself.
Yeah.
And like not judging yourself. It's okay. Because I feel like, to me, I think that was the biggest aha moment in therapy. And the whole mindfulness journey that we've talked about earlier in our episodes.
Yeah.
That was the first step, because just identifying the patterns in my head and being like, oh, there you go again. You're doing it again. Like catching yourself doing it and being like, it's okay. It's okay. You've taken a big step where you're actually reached the stage where you can identify those patterns. And that itself is like, that realization itself is so huge.
Yeah.
Because once you do that, then you can dig deep into the why. Then you can dig deep in how I can rewire my brain and how I can change this for the better.
Correct. And I think, why we should probably give our audience a little bit about ourselves and why we kind of jumped into understanding and seeking therapy. Because until a few years ago, like you said, therapy was not this word that I really entertained in my life. So just like everybody else, coming from India to here, that word somehow had this negative connotation to it. But life kind of changed for me. I think deep down, I've had my own share of childhood trauma growing up in India with a very abusive environment. And I did not understand that trauma has its effects, as, in everything we do, in the choices we make in our life, in the way we react to situations. So I was always this person who was more of a reactive personality than a responsive personality. And because of the abuse and trauma, I always felt that I was resilient. And in the sense, I am resilient, but what I always felt that was something that I could look back and say, look how strong I am. You need to be that strong as well. How can you complain when my life has been this bad? So I always judge people based on that scale. Like, are you complaining about these little things?
Look what I've gone through. Yeah.
Look what I've gone through.
Yeah.
And so I think nobody kind of met that standard for me. So my standard was so quite high.
Yeah.
And I realized that actually I was kind of projecting it on my daughter as well. When she was complaining of little things, it just bothered me because her life is way more comfortable than what I went through. So it was always like, look what I had to go through, but I never shared closely those experiences. But in my head, it's always been like, if anybody had any issues, I always ran back to my past as a comfort and started coming and attacking them or judging them from that thing. One thing that helped me, it drove me to really do a lot of things in life, challenge myself, because I was always trying to challenge and become better and better and better. But that came at a cost. It burned me out. And then in like COVID hit and, my previous relationship kind of died down. We're still remaining as good friends. We co-parent our daughter. But, now I'm happily married with 3 kids. But then the patterns kept repeating in my new relationship as well. Again, the standards, were quite high. And it was always that I was always seeking somebody who could just, be there up in that pedestal. Knowing very little that the pedestal that I put was just coming from me. Yeah. Because I was only trying to be better and better and better, but I was projecting it on everyone and everything that I did. And I think that's where this awakening came. And the whole idea of understanding that it is all just me projecting and my reaction to my previous life circumstances that's kind of culminated into all of these episodes, wherein that was a big realization. Then it helped me seek therapy. How did I come to the realization? I still don't know, but I became an avid reader of many books in childhood trauma and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. The most recent book that actually was very eye-opening was What My Bones Know by Stephanie Fu. I think I must have told you about that.
Yes, I think yes, you did mention
and
it.
She talks about her childhood trauma, and everywhere she was saying something about her, I was shaking my head. I was like, I was that kid. High achievers, want to be better. Why? Because we're trying to somehow outlive the life we had in our past.
Yes, and kind of bury all those,
correct.
traumatic experiences, right?
Correct. Yeah. At the same time, we're always judging other people because we're doing that. We want everybody who's surrounding us to be even better than us.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from, again, everybody has their own journey, but somehow we want everybody to fit into our journey. And I think that is where I had to pull a plug after reading that book. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is literally what's happening to me. And I started watching out for my triggers. I've been seeking therapy even before that, but then this kind of made me really, really seek therapy as one of the main solutions to this reactive personality that I have. And so I started seeking therapy, and it's been a blessing. It's been a combination of seeking spirituality and seeking therapy side by side that's really helped me.
Because I was about to say that, because is part of your whole alternative medicine, because, you are a pathologist, but you started going on this alternative, healing methodologies, and you did so many certifications. You were doing all of that. I think there was, and now I sense a feeling of like seeking.
Yes.
You were seeking out,
yes,
reaching out, because you were like, I want to make this work for me. So let me explore all of this.
Yes.
And I think that kind of eventually, like, there was a fork in the road where you like kind of therapy and spirituality kind of met.
Yes.
And now you're on this unique path.
Absolutely. And I still feel like I'm always looking. And all I'm doing is I'm actually looking for solutions to heal myself. In the process, I'm learning all these tools and techniques.
Yeah.
Because I think when I find the solution, it only will transform into helping others.
Yes.
And so this has been my journey post-COVID, when I've been acquiring all these certifications and all these trainings as a tool to really help heal myself.
Yeah.
But in the journey, it's been transforming me. And I can only imagine how these tools and techniques will transform somebody else.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting. And I'm also now reading this book called Transforming Trauma by James Gordon. And he says that people who really have this healing, who try to heal the world, like Mother Teresa. I'm not accounting myself to that level, but what I'm trying to say is people have really gone out and done unhealed people or been this compassionate people have had extremely traumatic childhood themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm sure many of those seekers were seeking a healing for themselves, which in turn translated in them healing others. And everybody's pretty much, it's a common theme in all of the stories of people who have shown compassion and healing towards others. And I think I'm on that journey, Shwetha. I'm not even close, but it's very nice to really know why I am drawn towards all of these. And it kind of comes full circle. So now I'm seeking therapy. Thanks to you. You introduced me to this really amazing person who we're going to interview in a couple episodes from now.
Yes.
And she's been, just the first day I spoke to her, I just had all this. Whenever I talk about my trauma, it drives my emotions. It drives me to tears. And it even moves me because I think there is a lot of anger inside. There is a lot of bottled anger. There's a lot of frustration, and there's a lot of pity. And, a lot of self-pity, victimization, everything that just is bottled up. And so it just releases out when I speak about my childhood. So when I had my first meeting with her, I just exploded. And I still remember sitting at the car park and just crying away, tearing away. Even as I say that, I'm tearing now. And it was such a huge release. I needed it. And she was amazing in the sense, like, she just pointed. She didn't really talk a lot. She listened more. But she steered you into talking more about certain things that she wanted you to release.
She's
more.
like slowly trying to peel those layers of emotions that you've not visited. You've kind of buried, deep.
And I thanked her for that. And I think I'm looking forward to that journey with her. So when I am a convert, I initially went on this route of like, I have faced a life like this. You guys should shut up and just
suck it up.
Suck it up and just do better. Therapy is just bullshit. Depression doesn't exist. It's all in the state of your mind. And I am
because those are the lines we heard, right? That was the taboo. That was the stigma, and that it still is today. A lot of work. We've made huge strides, but there's still so much work to be done. And that is where our feelings stem from.
Correct. And I think this is a journey for us. So it's not over. And as we continue these conversations, we're going to let our audience know how therapy has transformed us. But we just want to send out the message to everyone that, everybody has gone through some childhood experience or adulthood experience or something that shapes them or gives a pattern or a trigger for them. And therapy is just a way of really releasing that trigger or trauma out there, and really understanding a lot more about ourselves and the wiring and the behaviors. So anyway, that's a bit about me, and we can dive deep later in many of these episodes as we talk about our experiences. But let's shift gears and talk about what got you into therapy and what your approach has been.
Actually, before we go into that, as you were talking about how traumatic experiences kind of made you this person and that you seeked healing. And you're like, if it can benefit me, it can benefit everyone else. Do you remember actually our conversation with Nami, who's a life coach? This is exactly what she said. Because she had gone through so much pain in her life that she was like, if this can heal me, imagine what it can do to others. And that's when she went through the route of mindfulness, and then she is now a life coach.
Correct.
This was exactly. So if for our listeners, if you don't know what we're talking about, revisit our episode, our conversation with Namita Jagtiani. She's a life coach, and she dives deep into this very topic, and you'll find a lot of similarities in how she dealt with struggles and pain, and she actually came out stronger and was like, if this can heal me, what it can do to others.
And there is no, at the end of the day, it's not like I'm healed. This is a journey. This is going to take years. This is a process. And every time the pattern is going to repeat and the triggers are going to exist, this time you're just more aware of it and consciously rewiring. There's this line, reparenting the inner child, especially in childhood traumas. So I am learning that is such an effective tool. And I've been learning some techniques to do that. And I am being my own parent.
I think that we should talk about that in another episode.
For sure.
Yeah, we should definitely talk about
that. It's such a strong and powerful tool. There are very different tools to doing that, but it's the overall thing is called reparenting your inner child. And it's been so effective. And we'll talk more about that. But yes, talk about yourself, Shwetha. What's going on?
Yeah. I think my journey into kind of mindfulness, spirituality, and the thought about therapy even, I think started right during the pandemic. I think that was, we've talked about this. It was such a huge pause for the whole world, kind of gave everybody time, gave me time. And I think for me, it was, I started recognizing these patterns and these behaviors that I, as a teenager, was like, I don't want to be this person when I grow up, because that's what I saw around me in my family. So for me, a lot of it stems from the relationship my parents had with each other and the kind of environment there was. Because again, that generation, it comes from a lot of unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
For her, like say for my mother, for my grandmother. So it's a lot of generational trauma. And I kind of started understanding that. But when I started seeing it, but I was extremely frazzled. I still remember, to me, I think the biggest trigger point was my lowest point. It was like the winter of 2020. I had a very close call with like a huge mental breakdown. Like it was kind of bad. I remember just like crying so hard. My husband, who comes from a very harmonious childhood, had no issues. He was just like, he didn't know what to do. He didn't know what was happening. And he didn't know how to help. He was just trying to console me. But like, I was just like blaming myself for all the parts of myself that I wasn't proud of. So it was a very, very rough moment. And at that point, again, I don't think I came to the point where, I need therapy. Like I didn't realize that just yet. But I was like, I need to work on this. Like, what do I do? But, I was saying like, for everyone's journey is so different. Like I didn't hit this and I'm like, okay, I need to see a therapist, because we're still, kind of conditioned by our culture, right?
Yeah.
And what we've seen and heard. So I remember talking to two friends, one of them who had met very recently, Deepa Pillai, who was again on our podcast last season. And just having these heart-to-heart conversations where she would just sit and just listen to me. And she would share her experiences. And then, those two friends kind of made me feel that, okay, you're not alone. And I remember talking to another friend, my friend Shruti, and when I was talking to her about, what I had seen in my household. And for me, the way I looked at Shruti and her parents was like this picture perfect couple. Everything was growing so great. And when she actually shared the realities of, her life and story, I was like, okay, wow. Oh, so you do get it. You do get what I'm going through. Because I had come to a point where I'm like, I would do something, I would behave a certain way. And I'd be like, oh my God, no, this is not me. And I remember saying stuff like this to my husband, and he'd be like, I don't understand. What do you mean this is not you? Because that was me identifying where it's coming from.
Right.
But then kind of, sinking because I didn't know how to resolve it.
Correct.
So I think that was my first, introduction into thinking about mindfulness, thinking about spirituality. And I think how I addressed it first was getting into meditation, getting into yoga, getting into journaling, which we've talked about in depth in our previous episodes and seasons. And I think the second big blow kind of came in 2021 when I lost my grandfather. So that again, in my adult life, I had been lucky enough that I'd never had to deal with that kind of grief. But that left me very unprepared. For one, when it happened, it was still the pandemic. I was not close. I was here. My whole family was in India. And they were physically there, dealing with the logistics of everything, how difficult it was during COVID, funerals and everything, all of that. And I felt completely isolated because my grief and my experience from a distance and what the pain I was feeling was very, very different from what they were going through in, real time and facing. And there was no one really to understand that. Because everybody was busy dealing with grief. And I would just like completely total, if I should psycho, I would call 1,000,000 times a day. People would not pick up the phone because they would be busy, either getting things together, getting an ambulance, whatever they were doing, right?
Right.
But I wouldn't understand that. And I remember I was completely distraught. I did not know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And again, at that point, I remember Deepa was the one who held my hand. Long hours of conversation, and I started connecting to all the parts of my grandfather that I really loved. His love for Rama. So I took to dance, dance was my big outlet at the time. I started, because they say in Bharatanatyam, there are certain emotions, the certain rasas that are very, very hard to emote. And the longing for someone, most of your nayikas, right? They're longing for a lover or longing for this person or the loss, right? And I've always struggled to emote that. And I'm telling you, life experience happened and I took to it. And there's this Varanam in, it's called Sakhiye. I remember just revisiting that one paragraph where she actually talks about this very emotion.
Wonderful.
Where she says, where it says morning, day, day and night, I don't want food, I don't want water, nothing makes me happy. All I want is just you. And for me, it was if I could just turn back time and just get one little, chunk of time with my grandfather, I would do anything for it. So I remember emoting that and it just came out so, if I should say so myself, I had never been able to emote it and I was just able to do it like that. So these were the channels that I kind of, seeked out.
So it's interesting what you're saying. So we're talking about normalizing therapy, but I think this is where we need to dive in the next few episodes and talk about the different forms of therapy.
Yeah.
One of the forms that you used was art therapy, dance therapy, right?
Yeah.
And there's music therapy and there's so many different ways people can release their emotions.
Yeah.
And then start, understanding their triggers and be more self-aware.
Yeah.
And you used the Bharatanatyam dance form as one of the therapeutic outlets. I still haven't figured out what exactly is my best way of emoting. But right now, conversations have been the best tool for me to really talk about my story out loud. Because for the long time, I've kind of suppressed it with shame and guilt and fear and taboo. But then I think I'm not telling my audience the story yet because for obvious reasons, but I'm still not there. But I've been happily sharing it within close walls to my, therapists and a few very close friends, including yourself. So I think, there are so many different forms of therapy and we'll dive deep into it when we talk with Karina as well in our few episodes. But what you're saying is just beautiful. You really wanted to find that emotion. You just didn't know how to get to that emotion of grief. And suddenly this dance form just came as your outlet. And that's beautiful. I also know of somebody else who had gone through a similar experience and then who ultimately became a dance therapist because of this, because they felt that their emotion was best expressed through dance and they have become a dance therapist too because of that. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, because, this is exactly what we wanted to do. To work the whole idea of this theme, this season, is to have those personal, deep conversations with the aim to collectively create that safe, non-judgmental space for a diverse group of people. And a lot of us are immigrants and, we come from those different cultures, and to just get comfortable and normalize conversations around therapy, which is always the first step.
Correct.
So and I mean, we both are sharing and will continue sharing parts of our life and parts of our journey that we've never talked about in the open. And I think I have never felt more comfortable. You, our audience, and, the two of us here sitting here and having this conversation, this is our safe space. Because we're all human and we all come through life with different paths, and different influences. So this is what makes us real, makes us human.
That is very true. So I think this episode we've used to kind of start having a conversation about therapy and use some of our experiences. But we're going to dive in a little more deeper in the next few episodes about mental health and also, keeping therapy and normalizing therapy as our main concept.
Yeah, like statistics. We're going to talk so much about statistics and the studies and why there's not actually enough data about South Asians in the mental health space. So, that's another big thing. And organizations that are doing a lot of groundbreaking work right now, which is very, very important.
Correct.
So our listeners can actually seek out those resources.
Yes. So folks, if you have any questions regarding mental health, if you would like to have your questions answered by a therapist, we will be interviewing a therapist in the next couple episodes. And we would definitely have your, questions answered.
Yeah.
So please do send it to us. Please share this podcast with anybody you think will benefit from these kind of conversations. Mm-hmm. And please spread the word because, mental health is important. Of course, we all know that.
Yeah.
But I think the burnout and mental health issues is becoming a growing epidemic across not just South Asian culture, but many
everywhere.
cultures.
Yes. Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
And this is something that we all have to be aware of. And just to normalize therapy as a means to address as a solution for this growing epidemic.
Yeah. And before we sign off, as many of you have seen on our social media channels, we announced that we're launching a newsletter. And that is where we want to, carry on. It's obviously the Chivezation continues on the newsletter and you can sign up for it. What the main goal is to kind of have these collective conversations, collective thoughts in continuation, whether it's on our social media channels, on our newsletter, and bring you exclusive content. So please sign up for it.
Yeah.
It's chaibreakpodcast.substack.com. It's just one email a month. We promise. No spam. Just one email a month. And it'll be a quick 5-minute read. And we really hope to add more value in whatever we do.
That is true. All right. So until then, goodbye from us and look forward to our episodes on this topic. I'm sure you will love it.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed our conversation as much as we did. Please let us know what you think. It means the world to us.
Yes, and join the Chivezation on our social media channels, where we discuss the many facets of mental health and well-being and share our collective thoughts. If there's a topic you'd like us to talk about, write to us at chaibreakpodcast@gmail.com or DM us on our Instagram account.